This video is rated B for you'd better back on out of here if you don't want spoilers, buddy. Hello my friends, I am the Synodic Scribe, your observer of all things lore, and today we're going to have a fun what-if scenario. As we all know, the Final Days was a universe-ending catastrophe, something that did not only bring Aetherius onto its knees, but would have brought an end to life in this universe as we understand it. The entire universe of Final Fantasy XIV hinges on the Final Days happening. If they didn't happen, well, all the characters, events, and interactions we've had quite literally couldn't have happened. So, today my friends, we are going to ask ourselves, what would the universe of Final Fantasy XIV look like if the Final Days never occurred? What would the ancients have done if left to their own devices? And I think the best place to start this conversation is with understanding how the Final Days became the crux of everything to begin with. So, first, let us ask ourselves, what was the Final Days? Well, the Final Days was a cataclysmic event fueled by Dynamis being perpetuated by the entity we now understand as the Endsinger, which was an amalgamation of Meteion and all of her sisters over on the far side of the universe in Ultima Thule. The song that Meteion and her sisters were singing was not discriminatory. It infected many worlds and brought an end to likely many untold and unknown civilizations. One day, their star may have just been fine, and then the next, everything was starting to fall to ruin. Now, of course, the MSQ was quick to point out that some stars had more or less already fallen, but the Endsinger's song was going to ensure that new life, a new story on that star, could never begin. So, the Final Days has brought the universe to heel, and the Final Days was being perpetuated by Meteion. But Meteion was ultimately created by Hermes. Indeed, it's with him that the ultimate fate of the Final Fantasy XIV universe rests. It is not inaccurate to say that Hermes is in fact the penultimate villain of the Final Fantasy XIV story, simply because without him, his decisions, and ultimately his betrayal, does anything that we understand even happen? Without him, everything as we understand it doesn't occur. So, for the sake of debate, my friends, let us assume for a moment that Hermes doesn't exist. That, as an ancient, he never came into his own, or he was never made the leader of Elpis, or he never even created Meteion. Maybe he was never even born. Without him and his choices, nothing would have happened. Nothing would have occurred to have caused the Final Days as we know them. But of course, that does not mean that other events may not have occurred in their place. So let us start by asking ourselves a simple question. If Hermes did not exist, would another person like Hermes simply have risen up and taken his place and done the same things he did? After combing over the lore, my notes, and even going over some developer dialogue, I came to the conclusion that, well, no, a second Hermes was very unlikely. We have to understand that as an individual, Hermes was very unique. He was an individual who was within a position of power to get away with things that most ancients wouldn't be able to. He had access to tools that others wouldn't have, and then, at the very end, even after realizing what Meteion and her sisters planned on doing, he chose to betray not only the ancients of Elpis, but that of his entire society, the world, and ultimately the universe. If Hermes in this cutscene had suddenly changed his mind and sided with Emet-Selch and everyone else, well, we may have been looking at a completely different story. Hermes got away with what he did because of many withstanding factors. It was not just one singular thing that resulted in the Final Days. He was the wrong person to put in a position of power, and then Everyone turned a blind eye to what he was creating and what he was doing until the very last moment. And then his final choices ultimately sealed the fate of everyone. I was never able to observe such a unique series of events happening a second time, no matter how many times I looked over my notes over and over again. In fact, when I questioned other people on why they thought a second Hermes might have cropped up into existence, everyone always responded to me with, well, it was because the ancients had no idea of mental health or psychology, which I found incredibly odd because that's fundamentally untrue. We have to remember that there was a seat on the Convocation 14 with a very important word in their job description. And, well, this is a position that most all players should be intimately aware of. Azim. Azim was known as the Pilgrim of the Star and counselor to its people. A counselor, someone to confide within, someone to hear out. One of the most important positions in the Convocation of 14's leadership had the word counselor in their job description. And not only that, there would have been ancients, much like the words of Eorzea, that followed the ideas and philosophies that Azim represented. So imagine how many more counselors and people willing to hear you out were existing at the same time. Elpis had the Morning Dew, a location at a lab specifically designed for relaxation, decompression, and, well, enjoying yourself. Not only that, the seat of Emeroloth was very important in medical procedures, and anyone who understands medicine knows that understanding a patient's mental state or psychology is very important. But the Ascians engaged in psychological warfare to get people to do what they wanted over and over again across thousands of years. To believe that the ancients had no idea of what psychology or mental health was is to ignore a lot of lore. So in summary, I do not see a second Hermes arising to replace the first if he no longer existed. But even without a character like Hermes, that does not mean that some ancients would not have made selfish decisions and selfish actions. And this leads us to point number 2, someone we all know as Athena. Thanks to the Pandemonium raid, we understand that Athena was trying to more or less ascend herself to godhood. You see, the ancients had a great many powers and abilities. They could fabricate or manifest just about anything they wanted with creation magic, except for a soul. They could not control or create souls in a meaningful way without being, well, forceful. And, of course, to the ancients, manipulation of souls was considered unethical, much like how necromancy is considered unethical in many cultures in the 7th Astral Era. So the question becomes, without Hermes, without the final days, would Athena have become a world-ending disaster? And to that, well, I guess it all depends. The lore suggests that, well, no, she would not have become that much of a problem simply because, well, she had already been dealt with by Eorzea. Imagine with me for a moment, my friends, that Elidibus returns to the Convocation of 14, informing all chairs of the threat of Athena. Unless Athena, in her machinations and madness, had a special power, ability, or tactic to circumvent the strength of the ancients, I cannot see her overcoming the full might of ancient society. Especially since she was so handedly dealt with beforehand by just Eorzea and his retinue. And again, I do not see anyone else like Athena rising up to take her place if she was defeated, simply because, well, the entire reason she went mad was because of the aforementioned space rock within the raid. The stone that drove her to madness was unique in its ability to emphasize or increase the best and or worst qualities of someone in its vicinity. In Athena's case, well, she must have already had some kind of god complex in her mind in order for it to grow beyond her emotional control, driving her quite literally insane. So long as the stone was secured and taken care of, someone else like Athena would not have risen up. Or maybe they would have. Maybe Athena had a special power that made dealing with her difficult for the ancients. But it's hard to say, because the entire reason the ancients failed to withstand the final days as they did was because they were dealing with dynamis, an energy they had only just recently begun to theorize about, and even fewer ancients even knew existed. Meanwhile, Athena seemed to be a purely ethereal being using ethereal magics, something that the ancients were already very used to dealing with. But beyond Hermes, beyond Athena, let us assume that, well, the ancients never did run into a problem. What if there was no issue they could not overcome? What would happen to them? So to our next end, let us ask the creators and, well, developers of Endwalker what they think would have happened to the ancients if the final days had never occurred. When interviewed, Ishikawa responded that she believed that the ancients might have ended up the same as the Nibiruun. But who are the Nibiruun? Well, for any of you who have played through the MSQ, you would have come across a rather beautiful and oddly displacent location in one of the final dungeons. Now, while the ancients did wear robes and masks to cast aside things like vanity and bring together their community, the Nibiruun were much more extreme. The ancients did express themselves creatively. In fact, they were encouraged to do so. The Nibiruun, from everything I've been able to read, were completely unified in their way of thinking. There was no individuality. There was no unique way of thinking. If you spoke to one member of the Nibiruun, you had essentially talked to all of them. They are certainly a strange people, but they had reached such perfect unity that, well, nothing bothered them anymore. There was no problem that the Nibiruun faced that they could not overcome, and in their own perfection, they found apathy. With nothing to challenge them anymore, life lost its flavor, all the colors of the universe became gray, and they lost themselves, eventually choosing to perish rather than continue existing. They had quite literally become bored with life. It is important to note, my friends, that Ishikawa does not say definitively that the ancients would have become just like the Nibiruun, only that that might happen. It was certainly a future that could have occurred, and I can definitely see it. When we travel back in time to Elpis, the ancients had already reached what would be considered, well, social perfection. Emet-Selch wasn't wrong in saying that the ancients lived in what many would consider to be paradise. No war, no disease, no discrimination, just creators and their creations, people and their love for the world they lived upon. If we fast forward the clock thousands, maybe even tens of thousands of years, would that same love still persist? Would that same passion still burn bright? Maybe it would, and maybe it wouldn't. Maybe the ancients would have become apathetic to their own perfection just like the Nibiruun, and, well, simply chose to let go of everything they had worked so hard for. That, of course, would be a very unfortunate fate the ancients to suffer after everything that they had been through. But if one of the writers says it was a very possible future for them, I am not going to say it isn't impossible. However, for every unfortunate event, there is a positive outcome, I believe, as well. Perhaps the ancients never lost their passion. Perhaps they never lost their love for Eorzea. And then one has to ask themselves, what would that look like? Well, I believe we've already been told by an ancient themselves, and I believe he explains it best.
Mankind is the life of Eorzea. Each of us, a drop of blood flowing through its veins, bearing sustenance. In our finite time upon it, 'tis our duty to make it a better place, that all who call it home, now and in future, may abide in happiness. To that end, we have dedicated ourselves to the pursuit of enlightened creation, and by our efforts did we transform this once untamed wilderness into the peaceful paradise you enjoy today. To return to the star whence we came is a privilege afforded to we who have so loved and nurtured it. A choice embraced by those who have lived their lives to the fullest, in service to our world. And when they depart upon this journey, it is beautiful, always.
Hythlodaeus makes it very clear that once the ancients feel that they have done their best and that there is nothing more that they can offer their community, their star, or anything, they are happy to return to the ethereal realm and await reincarnation. What form will they take next? Well, that's for life to decide, not them. Maybe they will come back as one of their creations and live their life that way. Or perhaps they will become a new ancient, someone who has passion in new things that they didn't before in their previous life. Within a glass half full kind of mindset, I believe it is also possible that the ancients would have not only perfected themselves but the star to the point that they were prepared to let go of everything. If the ancients were prepared to sacrifice themselves en masse to try to prevent the final days, who's to say that they weren't also prepared to let go of their power and their positions and return to the star and let the star choose what happens next? Maybe some ancients would stay behind and watch over their world and creations, much like the Watcher watches over the Source. Or maybe all of them would return to the star and allow life and reality to unfold in an unknown amount of infinite ways. But, my friends, that is only a handful of ideas and perspectives that I've presented today. What I want to know is, what do you think the universe of Final Fantasy XIV would look like without the final days? How do you feel ancient society would have progressed if they hadn't met such a destructive end? How would the people of Aetheris have reacted to Midgardsormr arriving on their star while it wasn't sundered? And to that extent, do you believe that even without the Endsinger, a new alien force somewhere in the universe would have become a problem that threatened all life on Aetheris? I am eager to see your theories and suggestions in the comment section below, and as always, all I ask in return is that you be respectful to other people's points of view. Let me know if you want to see more fun and creative theory crafting videos in the future. Do not forget to subscribe for more lore content, like this video for the algorithm, but above all else, I hope you are having an amazing day, and I look forward to seeing you again. And as always, stay safe, my friends. Thank you all for watching to the end. If you enjoyed this video, why not subscribe and share this with your fellow adventurers? With your help, I'll try to reach out even further and bring even greater stories to you. Although, I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge my biggest contributors. A grand thank you to Amina Viltaria, Slippers, Potato, Sage Mouse, Sinalv Bagel, Cizani, and Travan Shea, with an additional nod to the scholarships on screen. Links to things like my Twitter and that of my channel artist Caddy can be found in the description. Thank you all for your viewership as well as your support, and I hope all of you have a wonderful day. Class dismissed.